Good morning. Sorry to be a couple minutes behind here. Joe, come on. We clearly want to talk about the storm and related topics, so I've got with me from left to right DOT Commissioner Diane Gutierrez-Scacchetti, Colonel Pat Callahan of the State Police, Joe Fjord, President of the BPU, Attorney General Grabir Grewal, but we also have Sharif El-Nahal with us because we felt, given we were coming together with the press, that we wanted to give you an update on the tragedy that has unfolded and continues to unfold at the Wanacue facility with so many of the fatalities and awful realities that have taken place there. So forgive us, we're going to talk to both subjects given that we were getting together with you. I want to thank Woodbridge Mayor John McCormick, as always, for being a gracious host. John, thank you for being here today. So good morning. Welcome to the State Traffic Management Center, where I spent some time, I have to say, last evening, and it was a lot more chaotic here last night than it is, thank God, this morning. I'm here with the heart of our storm cabinet, and I've already introduced them. Yesterday, New Jersey and the region got an early taste of winter with our first storm. And it came much stronger and hit us harder than anyone or any organization had forecasted. And that is a fact. And that, by the way, is not just a reality in New Jersey. That's the case in New York City, New York State, Pennsylvania, Connecticut. The impacts and the effects of the storm were truly region-wide. I myself was traversing our roads yesterday, first across the state and then coming up here after that, and I understand and appreciate entirely and completely the frustration that I am hearing and our team is hearing from commuters. Every storm gives us, and this is not our first at this point by a mile, gives us a chance to review our response and to make adjustments for the next storm, which we know we will eventually have to meet. It's just a question of time. That process is already underway among this team and other agencies in our broader team. And by the way, that includes the Port Authority. I've asked for an explanation as to why the bus terminal access was restricted as it was, which only made things worse last night. This is a serious issue that I and our team have addressed to its leadership. It's unacceptable. On Wednesday, the DOT, knowing that we had something coming, no one realized the gravity of what was to come, but we knew something, a weather event was going to hit us yesterday. The DOT took the preemptive step of brining state highways to pre-treat them, which you've probably heard us say before is an important step to take, which you can only take before a storm gets underway. By yesterday afternoon, Diane, I believe, there were a total of 1,800 pieces of equipment that were on our roads, with even more being put into service. And that included both plows and spreaders, and they were ultimately deployed yesterday to clear our roadways. Unfortunately, the worst of the storm coincided with the early dismissals from schools and workplaces, meaning that just when we needed our road crews and all that equipment out there the most, they were competing with folks, understandably, by the way, trying to get back home at the same time as well. And on top of the worsening conditions, numerous accidents further impacted our efforts. As of this morning, Pat, I believe just under 1,000 accidents and just under 1,900 motorist aid requests. And sadly and tragically, there was one fatality in a train car on the tracks, accident and tragedy in New Providence. I know it was a trying time and it was a trying commute, especially for those who weren't able to make it home and spent late into the night or even in some cases in a hotel. Other than that awful tragedy and fatality, the most important thing is that the rest of the folks are safe. Thankfully, we did not see, and Joe will speak to this, the number of power outages across the state that either we have had in recent storms or that we had expected when we were in our storm cabinet yesterday afternoon. The total number of outages overnight ticked up slightly to slightly over 11,000, especially nearer to the shore. And as somebody who lives on the shore, the high winds were felt like at least hurricane gale force. But utility company restorations are underway as the winds have died down and made it safer for crews to get up to the lines. And I believe that number is now just under 9,300 outages. A lot of them are in Monmouth County on the shore, I believe, right? State government is in full operation today. I can't conclude without thanking the women and men of the DOT who worked throughout the day and night to clear our roads. I was with some of them, as I mentioned here last night, and of course our great state troopers, and by the way, they co-locate here as well. This fusion center is one of a kind in the United States, where you have a variety of branches of government that have a logical relationship with each other that are here under one roof. I want to thank local police and first responders, the utility lines men and women, in many cases who went out into the worst of it to protect the public. Mayor McCormick is a good example of a mayor that we've had countless conversations, probably now into the hundreds of interactions with local governments just to get a sense for them to air their concerns and questions, for us to get a sense real time of what the reality was on the ground. The weekend looks like it's going to give us a chance to warm up a bit and get rid of much of the early snow. Although, as we were discussing earlier, Colonel Callahan referred to this, we're going to be at or near freezing overnight tonight. So we've got to be very vigilant as to what that might mean, in particular on the roads for black ice, or potentially in terms of lines that have a weight on them that they're not used to. We know this is not going to be our only bout this season with Mother Nature. We had a whole series of them right after I took office last winter. We will be ready as best we can for whatever winter has in store. And as always, I urge residents to review their own storm readiness and to visit ready.nj.gov. That's ready.nj.gov for preparedness tips. With that, I invite our leader of the Department of Transportation, Commissioner Diane Gutierrez-Scacchetti, to come on up and say a few words. Diane? Thank you.
Good morning. So first, I offer our apologies to all of our New Jerseyans who last night experienced a really rough commute home. It's never the DOT's intention to impact our commuters, our residents in that way. And clearly, I'm accountable for our performance. So let me go through a little bit of what happened. We had a weather forecast that up until midday yesterday indicated nothing less than 4 inches of snow, nothing more than 4 inches of snow. We went into a salt operation, which is typical at that point in time. Midday, when we started to see the rate fall, we started to get higher accumulations. We needed to switch to a plowing operation. But as the governor said, with early dismissals, with a lot of folks on the road, a plowing operation takes several trucks and several lanes, and they were not able to get through the congested areas. So we had a forecast that we planned to, and as the governor said, post-mortem, we need to look at some of the risks that come with those forecasts and work closely with our partners at National Weather Service to maybe make some different decisions and look at some key points again where we have to focus our attention on equipment, and we will do that. We had, as the governor said, 1,800 pieces of equipment. I commend those men and women at the DOT, at the New Jersey Turnpike Authority and South Jersey Transportation Authority for hanging in there in a very difficult situation. They were very frustrated that they could not get through to plow those roads. And once it cleared, as you look outside now, you can see roads are generally black and dry. We are responding to local requests where there may be some patches of state road that need additional treatment. We are deploying those folks as we can. We will stay in operation through the rest of today into the morning as we watch the forecast change, and we could get concerned about freezing weather overnight. As far as transit goes, the Gladstone line is hopefully going to be up by 2 p.m. We had difficulty getting equipment and crews up there because of the weather. The Jersey coastline is a different story. We had a tree fall on the catenary. We hope to get one rail up by rush hour. I can't promise that, but we are working hard to remedy that situation as well. Otherwise, we had 10 cancellations this morning, and bus service based on demand is running as we had hoped. So all in all, again, we understand the frustration. We're not happy with it. I listened to lots of the news last night, so I understand. We don't pre-position trucks to salt. I'll try to preempt some of your questions. We pre-position trucks to plow. So that's why people did not see trucks pre-positioned yesterday before the storm. Again, we got behind the storm. We realize that. And as the governor said, we will do a postmortem and we will improve our operations. So by the time the next storm is here, we'll be making different decisions and hopefully delivering the service that everyone expects of us. Thanks.
Thanks, Diane. Appreciate that. I want to ask Colonel Pat Callahan to come up and say a few words.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you.
I'll just echo the Commissioner's remarks with regards to how that came about yesterday. And I take myself back as a young trooper on 78, going westbound Jugtown Mountain. Yesterday was no different. And everybody in this room knows that once that one tractor trailer or two side by side stop, or if it's a jackknife, or if it's multiple motor vehicles, once that highway stops, the entire snowplow operation stops. You cannot plow, you cannot salt, and all of those trucks that, although we're out there, it's hard to see them because they're sitting in the same traffic as everybody else. And you literally have to pull those tractor trailers, whether that was on 280 or 78, wherever there's those inclines, they have to get pulled one at a time by heavy-duty tow trucks and by rubber tire loaders and by whatever means you see fit. So having been out there, like I said, as a young trooper, it is frustrating. I use this opportunity and the frustration to remind everybody out there in the most densely populated state in the country, as one of those pillars of emergency management, is preparedness is key. Full tank of gas, charged cell phone, water, and maybe some snacks in your car. We do not like to hear that motorists are stranded for 4 or 5 hours, but the responsibility and the ability to be prepared does fall somewhat on the motorists as well in the event that we struggle to get those highways open. And yesterday was certainly an example of how being prepared and not running out of gas and then becoming part of even making it a greater problem. So I just use that just as another asterisk to remind people to be prepared, especially in these winter months when we're out there on the highways and byways in New Jersey. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. I appreciate it. Love to ask the President of the Board of Public Utilities, Joe Fjord, to come up and give us a few words. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Governor. We were very fortunate as far as lack of power outages this time. There were some, as the Governor indicated, but we are under 9,000 outages as we speak at the moment. And most of those outages occurred overnight due to the wind gusts that were experienced primarily along the coast. And that's why Monmouth County was affected so much. Our usual routine is to check with and communicate with the utilities when an oncoming storm is predicted. And all of the utilities, bar none, were predicting a minor event. And they're getting their information from a variety of weather forecasters, including the National Weather Service. So they weren't necessarily prepared. Where we lucked out is the fact that most of the trees had dropped their leaves already. So snow was not accumulating on the trees, on the branches, on the leaves themselves, which prevented trees from shedding their branches or collapsing. And that's why we had fewer outages than we might normally have in a storm like this. But the forecast was played a trick on us, and it's unfortunate, but everybody's resilient in New Jersey, and whenever I go out on a conference, I know the governor does the same thing. We're a special breed here in New Jersey. So thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I said yesterday in an interview that yesterday gave forecasting a bad name, and we mean it. Wanted to ask the Attorney General, Gabir Grewal, to come up and say a few words.
Thank you, Governor, and good morning, everyone. I want to echo the Governor's remarks and the Colonel's remarks by acknowledging all our first responders and law enforcement officers who did extraordinary work yesterday under, to say the least, extremely difficult circumstances, rendering aid to motorists, responding to accidents, and in one case, a fatality. They were our collective backstop yesterday, and I want to thank them for their efforts last night and continuing into this morning. while events like last night's bring out the best in all of us, they also bring out the worst in some of us. And so I've asked New Jersey Consumer Affairs to stand up their hotlines to receive any complaints about any type of predatory conduct that might have taken place last night or is taking place in the wake of last evening's storm, to take advantage of motorists, to take advantage of individuals who need to get a hotel room. So if anyone has a complaint to make in that regard, they can go to NewJerseyConsumerAffairs.gov, or if they have questions about particular types of conduct, they can call 973-504-6200, and that's 973-504-6200. We have those hotlines manned and standing ready to take any sorts of complaints about any sort of unscrupulous behavior that might be taking place, to take advantage of anyone affected as a result of last evening's storm and the fallout from it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Gabriel. Thank you. Thank you for that. It's extraordinary. We saw this obviously in huge quantities post-Sandy. And in fact, we were in Union Beach a couple weeks ago talking about some programs to make it easier for the still remaining 1,200 families to get back in their homes, and there's still bad action going on. It's extraordinary 6 years later. So this is unusual in the sense that we wanted to talk about two unrelated but very important topics, and I asked our Commissioner of Health, Dr. Sharif El-Nahal, to come with us today to give us a brief update on the tragedy at Wanacue. I've said this before, but as a father, it's crushing, putting aside my duties as governor, and I know Sharif joins me and his team in that respect. This is this is one of these viruses that can be in our midst at any moment in time, the adenovirus, but there's a particular strain, in this case, strain number 7, which particularly if you've got respiratory issues and you've got a fragile immune system to begin with, is potentially deadly, and sadly we've seen exactly that. So Sharif, would you mind coming up and give us a quick update, and then we'll take some of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. First, before I go into Wanacue, I just want to give my own expression of appreciation and thanks to the first responders, the emergency medical technicians who had to respond to accidents yesterday in the wake of the weather, in addition to the hospitals and emergency rooms that were assisting the injured folks as a result of the weather. I am heartbroken to inform the public about an 11th death of a patient previously cared for at the Wanacue Center for Nursing and Rehabilitation. The death occurred at a hospital last night. We now have 11 deaths and a total of 34 confirmed cases at the facility. That includes an additional confirmed case from lab tests that came back last night at the facility. I have 2 young children. The grief and hardship that families are experiencing right now is unthinkable, as the governor mentioned. We have taken aggressive steps in recent days to mitigate the situation as much as possible, given the circumstances we are facing. As the governor mentioned, this is an extremely severe strain of adenovirus that couldn't have occurred in a worse place, given the medically fragile patients that live at the Wanacue facility. As of yesterday afternoon, I've put in a request to the Medical Reserve Corps. This is a group of volunteer clinicians who in public health emergencies assist in various ways to protect the public. We've asked them to assist the facility in separating sick and well patients. Our ongoing analysis of the situation has revealed that the limitations in the facilities there in being able to do that has accounted for among the most major reasons for the outbreak being as severe as it has been and the outcomes we have seen. Up until this week, it has not been possible to completely separate those patients given the census there and facility constraints, but now due to decreasing census at the facility, it is. And the moment that I found out that it was, we've taken aggressive action to hold the facility accountable for doing so. I'm giving them a deadline of next Wednesday to complete that process. The idea behind putting out the request to the Medical Reserve Corps is to assist them with any staffing needed to get that done as soon as possible. My preference would be sooner than Wednesday, again, which is why we're asking for more staff and more help, but Wednesday is the hard deadline for that. That would be Wednesday the 21st. We also, on this past Wednesday, issued an enforcement action against the facility for serious deficiencies that we've noted on subsequent inspections that we've done since our first one on October 21st. This is in response to complaints the department has received directly from staff, from other members of the public that have let us know about concerning environment situations there. And they remain, they're going to be on site in subsequent days as well. We have a requirement for the facility to hire an infection preventionist, an infectious disease physician, or physician group to assist them in doing the most important thing they can do in this situation, really our only tool against this outbreak, which is strict enforcement of infection control protocols and reliable practice of those protocols for every single patient every time there's interaction with staff. And that remains our task. It's why we have a member of the Department of Health on site that will remain there. And we've already been cooperating with federal authorities on this, getting their assistance, most notably the CDC and CMS. They remain helpful to us and will remain helpful to us in the coming days. So that is the update, and I thank you for your time.
Thanks, Sharif. I think with that, unless anyone has anything else to add, we'll take a few questions, please.
Governor, this is not the first time that we have had a rush hour snowstorm. Has anybody figured out what the key to this is, plus the issue of why aren't salt trucks pre-positioned, as you say, the snow plows out?
So I'll let Diane answer the last question. I think what you're hearing is this was a perfect storm, to use a word that probably isn't appropriate. It wasn't forecasted to be the storm it was. It switched and came upon us very quickly. That happened as folks were moving into that early, when we figured it out, when folks figured it out, getting kids out of schools, folks getting out of work. That all came together at the exact time that the storm densified, got heavier, it got slow. So it not only got worse, it took a longer time in the state and in the region. I can't emphasize that enough. This is not a New Jersey-specific reality. And that combination was lethal. Let there be no doubt about it. Notwithstanding 1,800 pieces on the roads, you had realities that Pat referred to, where you had jackknife tractor trailers. That's not something you clear up in 5 minutes. In places, by the way, that have gnawed at us, as you said, it's not the first rush hour snowstorm, and places like that mountain have been a bane in the state's storm history, and that's something we've already started a postmortem. Believe me, all of us looking very hard in the mirror and very, making ourselves, as we should, uncomfortable, trying to figure out exactly what happened and what we could have done differently. Diane, would you mind addressing the salts and anything else you want to add?
Absolutely. So as you know, Brian, you've been covering transportation a long time. Salt trucks operate basically independent of each other. We can send a salt truck out. That spreader's going to throw salt over multiple lanes. They don't pre-position because they go, right? They're not waiting. They're out there in rain. They're out there doing a lot of work, not dependent on another truck to be behind them. In a plowing operation, they set up in pre-position because they're going tandem. So I know you've seen it where you see them come down the road 3 or 4 across so they can push snow out to the right. That's what we do. That was impossible yesterday. We had those salt trucks out there. I was out on 78 and I was out on 287 in the midst of all this. I was watching what was going on, and you could see those trucks. They were trying to get down the shoulder to clear a shoulder so people could pass on the shoulder. They couldn't get into the travel lanes. And so to the extent that we could learn from this, it's going to be more about looking at the forecast and coming up with what we believe the right threshold is to say, you know what, we do some very strategic plowing contracts that we pull out, have at the ready, almost like we do with standby wreckers. But that's what we're going to go back today and do when we finish up here, and really continue to look at ways to just refine what we do and continue to be better at it with every storm.
Should the highways have been closed down, the major highways?
Well, I honestly, Brian, I don't know how you do that. I'm going to leave it to Pat, but you've got interstate commerce issues. You have people trying to get to their children. You close down the state highway system. You have first responders. I'm not sure, Pat, but you would know the law. I don't think you can just close the state highway system down that easily.
So I would just,
Was there a better way
Brenda.
to have tried to clear the highways of the stranded vehicles? Because that was obviously part of the problem. There seems to be a disconnect between getting the stranded jackknife vehicles out of the way.
I'll let the experts answer that, but I have to say this is not only were we on the road yesterday, this is not abstract for our team. Sharif was in a head-on collision yesterday. Thank God you're okay. Kevin Dunn, your colleague who I was with here last night, no sooner had he and I left, he was thrown under his car on the side of the road. So this is hardly abstract. I'll let Pat and Diane answer the question on stranded vehicles.
So we have standby wreckers, heavy-duty regular wreckers that are available to us that we have ready to go in storms. Last night, and Pat, I don't have the numbers, maybe you do, there were a multitude of roads closed, ramps closed, because we had tractor trailers that were just fishtailing, they were jackknifing, they were turning over. There's only so many of them in the state. So, we deploy our resources to where they're most needed. But at the end of the day, I don't know that there's a better way. I think yesterday's storm was a bit unique in the fact that the forecast up until midday did not predict the 10 inches that some parts of New Jersey saw. And it's hard to plan to go from 4 to 6 to 10 inside of a 2-hour window. And when I drove from Atlantic City to Livingston, everything was short of some rain down south. The roads were dry. When I left Livingston to come back, I couldn't imagine in that half an hour that we could have had so much snowfall. So,
Anything you want to add, Pat?
I'll just add that I think part of our postmortem is looking at having, we know some of those key spots, Jugtown Mountain on 78, Milepost 9 on 280, and in tandem with law enforcement and DOT to be ready on Route 80 as well in Alamucci to have almost strike teams ready to go. Sometimes you have to be creative, and we could have snowplows going east in the westbound lanes, which I think we may get to that point. I think that even happened yesterday, which is a bizarre thing to see. But I think as far as the timing and getting ahead of that and doing that in a little bit more effective and efficient manner, it is not easy to upright a tractor trailer, and then you also have to wonder what's on it. Is it a load that has to be condemned because it's food or it's a beverage? So there's a lot of tentacles to it, but I think the after action and the hot wash of what we going to learn from what happened yesterday, we will be better.
I would just add, I would add to that, human nature is when you go through an experience like this, you try to, when you're given forecasts, as we've all said, we get them from many different sources, including and beginning with the National Weather Service, and you make assessments based on those forecasts. And I think one of the you would expect the human nature response from the enormous challenges of yesterday is we're going to virtually certain we will change our probability assessments and thresholds for making decisions about pre-deploying equipment, among other steps we could take. Please.
So can you ban certain vehicles? Because last night, 287, the jackknife tractor trailers were across 3 lanes of traffic. That slowed people down. Even on 23 last night,
Yep.
some of the plow trucks
Yeah.
were stopped.
So we've been asked this, and we've asked the question ourselves. Could you have done something about that? The answer is preemptively, you could, theoretically. So you could put a state of emergency in place that had particular relevant pieces to that, which would include potentially banning certain types of vehicles. The problem is we didn't have the preemptive. This came up literally inside of a very short amount of time, and it would have been it was virtually impossible to do that. Would you all agree with that statement? Anything you'd add to that, please? I'm sorry? Why didn't you? Because it's a preemptive action. That's what I was referring to in the answer to that question. A state of emergency is a prophylactic. It's a step you take in anticipation of something, not in the middle of an event. And the fact of the matter is this came out of nowhere. The severity of it came out of nowhere. And the state of emergency at that point isn't really relevant. We have to deal with the immediacy of clearing roads, getting stranded vehicles, accidents out of the way. Please.
From the DOT commissioner, we heard an apology and admission that the DOT got behind the storm. From your comments, I'm hearing a lot about the blame is almost on the weather and the severity of how things just kind of switched at a moment's notice. I mean, candidly, do you think the administration dropped the ball here, or is this just an issue of
That's too black and white an assessment, because you had extraordinary acts of heroism and extraordinary work being done by many thousands of members of the administration. At the end of the day, Matt, the buck stops with me, period. Part of this is the forecasts were lousy, and I'm not going to let the forecasters off the hook. Let there be no doubt about it. Secondly, this was a regional event. New Jersey didn't get singled out. This whole region got crushed in as far down as Alabama up into New England. Thirdly, clearly, we could have done better, and we will do better. Couple more, please.
Commissioner, I just have a question logistically about prepositioning salt trucks. I was in Verona yesterday with Essex County's planner, and he told me that their task is to get salt trucks out on the road at least a full hour before the first flakes fall. That's what I was told yesterday on camera by the person. Is it different county to county? Are there, do some places take their own liberties in doing that?
No, our trucks are out on the road. Prepositioning means we've got them sitting stationary somewhere, waiting. That's prepositioning. Our salt trucks were out moving an hour before the storm. They were ready to go. It was raining in the south. They were ready to be out. When we talk about prepositioning, we talk about when you're driving down the turnpike and you see a truck sitting on an overpass on 195. That's a plow prepositioned to salt. Our salt trucks were exactly where they were supposed to be yesterday. And we were out and about, like I said, 1,800 plus pieces of equipment. They were out salting. They were out in a variety of places in the state. Like I said, I spent a lot of time in North Jersey yesterday. So they were where they were supposed to be. What the counties do, we don't govern what they do. They don't govern what we do, but we do assist them. So at the end of the day, I would suggest to you that there's no difference in what you heard. It's maybe just the way it was explained to you, but we were exactly where we were supposed to be yesterday.
I don't know that today is the right day to do this. In fact, I'm sure it isn't. But at some point, giving the folks in the press a tour and understanding of the Fusion Center here behind us, I think would be time well spent, because it gives you some sense of how we coordinate across state agencies, but also how we interact with local communities as well. Please.
Governor, regarding New Jersey Transit, I know you said you've been in touch with them, and you say that that was unacceptable. Did they give you any response, explanation, opposing in Port Authority?
Yeah.
You say the commuters who just have no hope that the situation will get better as the winter goes on, because they've seen issues like this in past storms,
Yep.
where suddenly there's no buses and unpredictable.
Yep. So you said New Jersey Transit. I actually was referring to the Port Authority. So.
As Port Authority,
Yep.
with
So New Jersey Transit, just to reiterate, you've got some lines. Gladstone is down. It was down yesterday. It's going to come back up at 2. Rush hour tonight. Who else is down with the Jersey Coast line? You had yesterday 30 to 60 minute on average delays on the trains, 60 to 90 on buses. And, again, not a happy reality. The Port Authority was what I was referring to. You had enormous chaos there last night. And there is a reasonable explanation at one level that the chaos was because the buses weren't able to get across the Hudson River to get in to pick people up. So the disconnect between the amount of people and the amount of buses was unusually high. So this was, well, the port, please God, we'll get a new bus terminal, by the way, and this will alleviate that at some point. But in the meantime, this was an unusual disconnect between the amount of people there and the few number of buses. I personally think we're doing a postmortem on this. I was back and forth with the leadership of the Port Authority last evening, and we're doing a deep postmortem. At a minimum, the communication was completely unacceptable. At a minimum. Beyond that, we're going to wait to figure out exactly what happened. I do have some sympathy for the fact part of a big contributing factor was there weren't enough buses there. Before you just do one or two, I'll come back to you, I promise you. Yes.
Governor, you mentioned that fatality in your province.
Yes.
Can you say more about, was that definitely storm-related? Can you say more about what
I believe it was a woman in a car that got stuck on the tracks and was hit by a train. Is that right, Pat?
That is correct.
That is correct, and that's the extent
We're
of it.
not sure if it was weather-related at this point.
We don't know that. We know it happened at about 6 or 6:30 last night. Please.
Yes, Governor. We heard from folks who were stuck in their cars for 8, 9, 10 hours
Yeah.
on the New York side of the George Washington Bridge, and they had no information about what was going on and when they could get across. Some of them had to shut off their cars to conserve fuel.
Yep.
To what extent was there coordination with your counterparts over on that side of the river, and how is this going to be incorporated into your postmortem?
Yeah, well, obviously it's got to be incorporated in the postmortem. I heard a story of a woman who actually was reached out to us this morning, not happily, by the way, 9 months pregnant, who was in a car for 10 hours. I'm not sure it was at the George Washington Bridge. We had significant regional communication, as we always do, and I'll let Diane and Pat really are at the fulcrum of that. It does underscore the fact that this didn't just, this blessed storm didn't just sit on New Jersey. This was a regional nightmare. And it hit us particularly hard. It hit Pennsylvania, New York, and Connecticut particularly hard. I don't know if you want to comment at all on the interstate Obviously, Port Authority is the one particular area where we had active communication, spirited communication. That was, in fairness, much more specific to the bus terminal. Anything you want to add to that? Or?
Sure. We use Transcom as a regional operation for sharing traffic information. I don't know that they were fully updated at all times. I haven't talked to them. But we didn't learn until later in the day, or actually into the evening, that they were having some of these, experiencing some problems. So for us to respond to anyone on the New York side would have been impossible. But I will tell you that there is a call scheduled between the DOT Commissioner of New York State, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, and me, so that we can be certain that, not relying on Transcom, we have direct communication. And I think the state police are doing the exact same thing with the operations teams from each of those states.
Before I'll give Brenda, you get the last word here, but this is just a further plea that we really could use the federal government to help us on the rail side with the Portal Bridge and the Gateway Tunnel. We would have had a much better reality last night had those been built or rebuilt. Please.
In terms of communications, when was it precisely that you guys realized that this was going to turn into something that you weren't ready to handle? And again, was there a way to have, for example, let some of the schools know? I mean, there were a couple of schools where the kids ended up spending the night.
It's extraordinary. Yeah, 100%.
For
For me, it was literally at a lunch at the League with the League of Municipalities, about to go up and speak, and in fact, I said in my remarks, everybody better be really careful. The weather is coming down around us. I'm not sure what time. That was,
Sure.
lunchtime, basically.
Yeah, right around, I would say anywhere between maybe 1 and 2. The last forecast I saw around the 1:30 hour still had a 4 to 6 inch total for the most northern parts of the state. So it wasn't until after that we were really clued in that we were going to get hit a lot harder in the central and the central north part of the state. So that was we got our National Weather Service, that's who delivers that to us. And so that's what made it hard. I want to be very clear. When I say we got behind the storm, it wasn't for lack of trying. It was based on a weather forecast that didn't allow us to use the option we probably would have had we had that forecast from first thing in the morning.
So we will we're gonna wrap it up, and just want to say a couple of things. Number one, we want to keep an eye on what the temperatures look like overnight tonight. I mentioned this earlier. It looks like they're going to be around freezing, particularly in the western part of the state. So that's something we want to keep an eye on in terms of any black ice or power line issues. We will continue to, you should assume that we will do a very thorough and deep postmortem on what worked and what did not work. Whether that's regional, as again, this is a regional reality, not just a New Jersey reality, whether it's with the Port Authority, but I promise you with this group, as well as the rest of our storm cabinet, and as we have things to report on that front, we will make sure we get them back to you. Thank you all.